Late 1990, Miami International Airport. A U.S. customs inspector opens a shipment that just flew in from Venezuela. Inside, just under 1,000 pounds of pure cocaine. That alone wasn't unusual. What was unusual was where it came from. This cocaine wasn't smuggled past Venezuela's top anti-drug official. It was shipped by him. And he wasn't working alone. He was working with the CIA. So here's the question this video is going to answer. How does the United States end up creating the very drug network it would spend the next 30 years and billions of dollars trying to destroy? To understand how that cocaine got on that plane, you have to go back to the late 1980s. Venezuela sits in the worst possible place, right next to Colombia, the cocaine capital of the world. Every trafficker moving product north has one obvious problem. How do you get tons of cocaine past the authorities? The answer, it turned out, was simple. You don't get it past the authorities. You make the authorities your partner. Enter General Ramón Guillén Dávila. On paper, he was Venezuela's top drug fighter, head of the National Guard's anti-narcotics unit. He wore the sun insignia of a Venezuelan general on his shoulders. Remember those suns. They matter later. But what almost no one knew at the time was that General Guillén had a second employer, and that employer was in Langley, Virginia. Here's what investigators later pieced together, and what reporting by Time magazine made public back in 1993. A CIA officer working in Venezuela wanted to get one of Guillén's agents deep inside Colombia's Medellín cartel, the most powerful cocaine operation on Earth. To build that agent's credibility with the traffickers, the plan was, let real cocaine through. Let it ship to the United States. Don't stop it. In the intelligence world, there's even a phrase for it, a controlled delivery. You let the drugs walk so you can follow where they go and catch the bigger fish. But there was a problem. To make it work, the DEA, America's actual drug enforcement agency, had to agree not to intercept the shipments. The DEA's attaché in Caracas, Annabelle Grimm, was asked to let hundreds of pounds of cocaine flow into American cities. She refused. She believed the drugs would simply end up on the streets, with nothing to show for it. She was right, because the operation didn't stop when she said no. And years later, the man who ran America's DEA would admit on national television exactly what happened. In 1993, the American news program 60 Minutes put the story on national television. And the admission didn't come from some anonymous source. It came from Robert Bonner, the former head of the DEA itself. His words were about as blunt as it gets. He said the CIA had a relationship with Guillén and that they permitted him to bring a ton of cocaine into the United States. Let that land. The head of America's anti-drug agency saying on camera that American intelligence let 1 ton of cocaine into the country. And that one shipment was just the beginning. By the time U.S. prosecutors finished investigating, the figure they attached to the whole scheme was staggering. Up to 22 tons of cocaine moved into the United States and Europe, channeled through the office of America's closest anti-drug ally in the region. The CIA ran an internal review. Its conclusion? No wrongdoing. The cocaine, meanwhile, was already gone, sold, consumed on the streets of American cities. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, okay, this is one rogue operation, one general, one bad call in the early 90s, a mistake, not a system. And if the story ended there, you'd be right. But it didn't end there. Because that same structure, the generals, the sons on their shoulders, the military protecting the traffic, didn't get dismantled. It got inherited. In 1998, Hugo Chávez won the Venezuelan presidency. He didn't invent corruption in the Venezuelan military. As we've just seen, it was already there. What Chávez did was something different. He took a loose network of crooked officers and, over the next decade, turned it into an instrument of the state itself. The Brazilian investigative journalist Leonardo Coutinho spent years documenting this. Thousands of pages of records, more than 100 interviews across 10 countries. His conclusion was blunt. Venezuela didn't just host drug traffickers, the state became one. Remember those suns on the general's shoulders? Venezuelan journalists had a name for this network of officers. They called it El Cartel de los Soles, the cartel of the suns. Not a cartel that makes drugs, a cartel of men in uniform who move them, who protect the shipments, who approve which planes land and which planes take off. And under Chávez and then his successor, this network didn't just grow, it went into business with America's enemies. To the west, across the Colombian border, sat the FARC, a Marxist guerrilla army that financed its war with cocaine. For the Cartel of the Suns, the FARC was the perfect partner. The guerrillas had the product, the Venezuelan military had the territory, the airstrips, and the uniforms that made the whole thing untouchable. Cocaine came east into Venezuela, then north to the Caribbean, to Central America, to the United States. This is the part that turns a national scandal into an international one. Years later, U.S. prosecutors would formally accuse the highest levels of the Venezuelan government of running exactly this scheme, of conspiring with the FARC to, in their words, flood the United States with cocaine. And these weren't just accusations on paper. One former Venezuelan general was sentenced in a U.S. court to more than 20 years for arming and protecting the Colombian guerrillas. Venezuela's former spy chief, a man who'd been close to Chávez himself, pleaded guilty in a New York courtroom to narco-terrorism. The Suns were no longer a Venezuelan joke. They were a U.S. federal case. Now, I want to be straight with you about one thing, because it matters. There's a genuine debate about what the Cartel of the Suns actually is. Is it a single, organized criminal company, with a boss and a chain of command? Or is it something looser, a system of corruption, where military officers get rich protecting traffickers without one man running it all? Even some U.S. court filings have leaned toward that second description. But here's the thing, that debate barely changes the outcome. Whether you call it a company or a system, the cocaine moved, the planes flew, and the people buying and dying from that cocaine felt no difference at all. And it brings us back to where we started. Back to an intelligence officer who thought he could let a little cocaine through to catch the big fish. He didn't catch the big fish. He helped feed a machine that outlived him, outgrew him, and is still running today. So, back to our question. How does a country end up creating the drug network it spends decades fighting? Is that morally acceptable? The uncomfortable answer is that it doesn't usually happen on purpose. It happens one controlled delivery at a time. One general you decide to trust. One shipment you decide to let through, just this once. The drugs walked. They just never stopped walking. If you want more stories like this one, the secrets that were never supposed to surface, subscribe and stick around. One question before you go. If an intelligence agency breaks the same laws it's sworn to enforce, who's left to hold it accountable? Tell me what you think in the comments.